Hi, I've just seen a report from Sky News on YouTube, um, and the correspondent was interviewing the host of a Russian Orthodox TV channel, or rather, a channel linked to the Russian Orthodox Church. I'm not quite sure what its exact angle is, but it's a Russian nationalist channel regardless. I think the name was Greb TV. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the Croatian capital or if I misheard that. And I couldn't see in the caption underneath the precise name, but it sounded like Zagreb TV. I'll put a link to this video. Um, Huge respect to the journalist. I mean, I think it takes real guts to do that sort of interview. Not that she's going to be attacked on air or anything like that, but the thing about journalism is you need to take your emotions aside, and that is very, very difficult when you're dealing with liars and you're dealing with situations as serious as war. But it is important for the job, so that's an example of a very professional journalist. So I'm not sure who she was, but huge respect to her. Anyway, this guy was just parroting the Kremlin's lies about special military operation and taking on the Nazis of Ukraine and all the rest of it. Um, the real fascists of this situation are Russian nationalists, just like him. He's been subject to Western sanctions along with other Putin stooges. One of the most high profile, actually, and it's got relatively little coverage in the UK, perhaps it deserves more coverage, is the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder. Now, Schroeder has long been cozy with Putin, both during his time as Chancellor and afterwards. He has business interests in Russia. He might be the highest ranking Westerner with ties to Putin, if we consider Trump to be somewhat ambiguous. Um, I think Schroeder needs to be polarized. I think Schroeder needs to be shamed. Um, I think every high profile Westerner with ties to Putin needs to be shamed. I would say they need to be stigmatized. I basically think they need to be as uncomfortable as possible, short of violence or threats. Physical threats wouldn't help anyone. But I do think that they are on the wrong side of history. I think in the current context, it is no different from supporting the Third Reich in the late 1930s. I really think there's no difference. None. I mean, there's reports that Ukrainian civilians have been transported from Mariupol to mainland Russia, to Russia. Um, so it has echoes of the Stalinist era forced deportations. Um, it's quite sinister. This is truly a David and Goliath situation. Like I've said before, the main reasons why Ukraine is prevailing so strongly is the incredible courage of the Ukrainian people, and yes, the support they've got from Western countries. That support has still been checkered. There's been heavy sanctions. Military aid has been mixed. I mean, the new German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, his record is somewhat mixed. On one hand, he's done things that no previous chancellor has done, so he deserves credit for that, but he has also flip flopped. He's tough one day, he's kind of indecisive the next on whether to fully support Ukraine. For example, Germany sending tanks, but without rounds, as I understand it, if I've got that correct, which is kind of like a halfway house. Yeah, and it's almost like imagine there's a house on fire and the fire brigade turns up and they have a hose. And let's say the house is 10 meters away, but the hose only goes 5 meters. I know that's just an analogy I've just made up now, but that's what it's like. Ukraine needs all the support it can get. Now, Lavrov has accused the West of more or less being in de facto war with Russia because Western weapons are killing Russian troops. Um, the way this thing is going, it might only be a matter of time before there is a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. And it's a very very dangerous moment in time. I totally understand why Western governments are careful about this because we're dealing with a nuclear power led by an unhinged demagogue. Putin's capable of anything. So, there isn't much sense in poking the cornered dog in that sense, but I just feel such disgust the lies these Russian nationalists are telling. Um, Now, ordinary Russians who really are not in a position to have any access to outside sources, because Putin is making Russia like North Korea in terms of the restrictions. Um, I'm less kind of condemning of them because they're a product of their society. Um, I mean, you have to have a whole other level of brainwashing to have your own relatives, in some cases, tell you that there is a war going on, and they still say, no, Putin's telling us the truth, it's just a special military operation. There is no war. What I've also noticed recently is a lot of people from outside Europe, particularly, this is a curious thing, a lot of Africans, talking about sub-Saharan Africans, people from countries like Somalia, South Africa. This is just a few of the nationalities I've seen. Nigeria. Um, a concerning number are pro-Putin and pro-Russia. But there's no seeming reason for this, other than they want to have a go at the West. Now, to be fair, there's also been people in that part of the world who have. I heard about a group of Nigerians who wanted to join the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. It might well be that those black Africans are hearing the Russian lies that Ukraine's a Nazi country, and they think it's some sort of white supremacist thing. So we better back Russia because they're taking on the Nazis. And that shows the power of Russian state lies. And it's why I am more convinced than ever that banning RT was the right thing to do. I don't think that it's an asset to Western ideals to give the lies of a totalitarian dictatorship free rein. There will be those who say, well, free speech is absolute, so we should allow a hostile foreign regime to spread their lies. I disagree. I don't think we owe Russia anything. Um, but, I feel disgusted and angry about the situation, and I'm not even Ukrainian. If I was Ukrainian, if I saw what Russia was doing to my country, and even more so if I'd lost relatives. Like man the other day I read about who lost his wife, his mother-in-law, and his baby daughter. Um, I can't imagine the level of mental anguish and pain that someone in that position would be going through. Um, I can only imagine if I were him, I'd want to tear Putin apart. I'd want, I think it would be a very human response to feel nothing but hatred. Um, And that's why this is so awful what Putin has done, because not only has he invaded a sovereign country and done what he's done to Ukraine and inflicted this suffering on the Ukrainian people, he's condemned Russians as well, because for generations Russians will be hated as a nationality by Ukraine certainly and by much of Europe. And unfortunately, it will be a case of being tarred with the same brush. Russians who are anti-Putin will unfortunately be tarred by their nationality. I think that's wrong. I don't think they should be, but that's what's going to happen. Because Putin is making his country an international pariah. Even other totalitarian states like China are not fully getting on board with Russia. They're not jumping out of their way to support Russia. Certainly not supporting NATO or Ukraine, but they're not going out of the way to support Russia either. I think that's interesting. I think China knows full well how how much Putin is polarizing Russia. But China, of course, hasn't exactly been in anyone's good books of late recently either. But I think China has more clout in the sense that its economy is much bigger. And it may, Russia may have far more nuclear warheads, so you could argue Russia's bigger clout militarily in that sense. But I think China has more interconnections around the world. So China's survival is perhaps stronger. Um, but I just hope Ukrainians know that millions and millions and millions of people in the free world are on their side. I hope they know that because the lies of these Russian nationalists is it's just disgusting. Now, on the issue of fascism, I'll just address this as I see it. Of course, there's going to be far right elements in Ukraine. For example, it's often been reported the Azov battalion is comprised of neo Nazis and far right types. I've no doubt that Ukraine has neo Nazis. I've no doubt that Ukraine has far right racist elements. But it's a country of 43 million people. Of course, there's going to be unsavory elements, as you get in every country. The great irony is some of the most hardline, violent Nazis around, neo Nazis, can be found in Russia. We never talk about Russian neo Nazis. If Putin's so keen about denazifying, he should start in his own backyard. Russia. Russia's got a serious problem with neo Nazi activity. Um, in big Russian cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Volgograd, Novosibirsk, there has been a long track record of violent attacks on darker skinned people from, for example, the Caucasus, from Central Asia, um, by white Russians. So, if this is all about denazifying, Putin should start with Russia. I think, as for the Orthodox Church, I think Patriarch Kirill, who is a big stooge of Putin, he's the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Kirill. I think that the Pope, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think other church leaders should publicly denounce his support for Putin. They've condemned the war. I think they could go further and denounce Patriarch Kirill, say that this damages ecumenism. It certainly damages the Easter message. And there's absolutely nothing Christian about, you know, the Russian Orthodox Church's support for this. It's been split with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I suspect even within the Russian Orthodox Church, there are low level clergy who are very unhappy and uneasy about what they're saying. But it is extremely difficult to speak out in Russia. I would say, alongside the Ukrainian resistance, some of the bravest people in the world today are dissident Russians. Because not only do they face the stigma of being accused of being unpatriotic to Putin and Russia, but they face very real physical attacks. They face imprisonment. It's no wonder that many of them are trying to get out. And I think if it is absolutely clear that they are anti-Putin, they should be treated as political refugees. I mean, I think it's similar to those German dissidents who got out in the 30s, including Albert Einstein. Um, but this situation is grotesque. You have a situation where you have a powerful, nearly superpower, certainly former superpower, that is brutalizing a smaller neighbor day in and day out. It's telling lies about that smaller neighbor. Um, and a significant portion of the world believes it. The free world obviously doesn't. Those who have a brain on their shoulders, those who can see the obvious. But what I find stomach wrenching is that even in Western societies, we have useful idiots. And I think, quite honestly, I don't want to be vitriolic, but No words can sum up what I think of those people because they're enjoying all the freedom that you get from liberal democracy. You know, the video I made earlier about being pro-West, they're living in the West. And here's the thing, you know, being pro-Putin right now in Britain or Germany or other Western countries probably isn't going to be a very popular position to take. But the most you will get is some, you know, perhaps angry expressions or a bit of verbal abuse online at the most, at the most, unless they're actually betraying their countries at an espionage level. We don't have treason laws that deal with that. So simply saying I think Putin's right is not enough. I think maybe we will get to a point where it should be. In the video I made about pro-Putin traitors, my words should be prosecuted. I should clarify that. I'm talking about people who are working for the Russian state. For example, so-called freelance journalists who work for Russian state media. I do think they should be prosecuted as traitors. Because, you know, Russia's brutalizing Ukraine, but Russia's our enemy. There's no way we could see Russia as just another country. Russia attacked this country in Salisbury. Um, but I accept that, you know, simply saying I support Putin is not enough. I think, though, if people are, for example, involved in any capacity in the military, to some extent in academia, particularly if it involved sharing research with Russian colleagues. I mean, this has happened with China, where you have academics, particularly in sciences, who are sharing military technology research with their Chinese counterparts who have ties to the People's Liberation Army. I think academics need to be very, very careful. They might tell themselves, well, we're just working at an international level with our international colleagues, but they need to, you know, follow the dots and see how that links up. I think anyone who is knowingly pandering to the Putin regime should be treated with suspicion. Absolutely. As for traitors like George Galloway, let him sue me if he wants. Um, they don't even try to hide it. I mean, Galloway had a program Sputnik that was aired on Russia Today for years, and this guy has the audacity to say that he's not parroting Russian state media, that he's not part of Russian state media. Galloway can tell himself what he wants, but if you are towing out the pro Kremlin narrative, and that is being used to be broadcast to a Russian audience in favor of Putin's foreign policy, then what else is it? Really, what else is it? Other than pro-Russian state propaganda. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Um, even knowing that the majority sees common sense on this, they see this for what it is, there is a disturbing number of people who are either just plain ignorant or they're willfully lying or they have deluded themselves because they've went down that rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. More often than not, this is just my honest observation. A lot of the same people who, you know, say COVID is all a way to control populations and they get into other conspiracy theories are very likely to be pro-Putin because they basically don't trust any Western institution, including NATO. They think it's all one big plot to make Putin look bad. Well, I would ask them to consider some obvious things. If if what they say is true, and you know the fascist Ukrainian government has been killing Russians for years, wouldn't there be a pro-Russian uprising in Donbass and Luhansk, you know, on a scale that really, really was significant? That, for example, when Russia invaded, helped the Russian advance. That hasn't happened. You know, if Russian speakers in Ukraine um, felt so strongly against Kiev, wouldn't they be, you know, joining their Russian brothers in arms to overthrow Zelensky and his government. That hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. Even if you allow for the fact that there will be people in Donetsk and Luhansk that don't like Zelensky and don't like the Ukrainian government and maybe do feel more attached to Russia, clearly they haven't felt strongly enough about it that they have, created some massive uprising. It just hasn't happened. And, those who do feel that way inclined, um, in the self-described Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic militias or whatever they call themselves, I don't think they're a significant force, even in those regions. Because if they were, then those regions would be 100% Russian territory by now. They're not. They're not. But they really are echoes of the 30s, when Germany said, well, we're moving into this area, Sudetenland and so on, because we're protecting German speakers. It's pretty much the same argument. Um, I don't know. I don't know how this is all going to end up. I hope it doesn't escalate, but unfortunately, it shows no sign of abating. And how can you negotiate with a mad dog like Putin? How can you? The only way to negotiate with someone like that is to give him exactly what he wants, which is to basically take over the whole of Ukraine, call it Russia, and then what? Will Putin stop? No. I honestly believe that unchecked, Putin would basically want to reclaim the entire Tsarist Empire. I really do believe that he would do that. At the moment, that's not happening because I do think the Western sanctions have hurt Russia. They can put on a brave face and say they're not bothered, but I think beneath the surface they're fuming. I think it has hurt them. Um, Unfortunately, will hurt the Russian people as well. But hopefully, they will realize that the cause of all their woes is Putin. Johnson said something interesting today. He said that Putin's very popular in Russia and he could actually withdraw at this point. That's actually quite a clever thing to say. It's quite astute because I can understand Ukrainians hearing that might feel it's whoa, why is he saying that? But it makes sense. Putin has a lot of ego now. What Johnson is saying is that if Putin pulled out, he wouldn't lose anything in the Russian mind. It wouldn't be seen as a loss of face. That makes sense because dictators have this thing about face. It's the same with Xi Jinping. They have colossal ego, even though they're very thin-skinned and weak in that sense. They have colossal ego, and in that sense, if Putin was to pull out now, like completely pull out, what Boris Johnson is saying is actually it wouldn't hurt him in the Russian public mind. But will he do it? Fortunately, I think not. It could well be that Putin's actually got himself into a trap in that sense. He believes he can't pull out because he believes he will lose face, and he wants to look tough to his generals and all the rest of it. Um, and yet he can't advance because the Ukrainian resistance has been so fierce and so strong. Russian morale is terrible. Dozens of Russian generals have been killed. Um, Russia is losing this war, and doesn't mean Ukraine's winning. I think it would be a mistake to be complacent about that. But it's clear that Russia is not gaining the way it thought it would. And behind the scenes, Putin and Lavrov must be seeing red. They must be absolutely choking with rage. Um, but those of us who are anti-Putin and anti-Lavrov shouldn't be too complacent about that either, because as I say, a cornered dog is a dangerous dog. Putin, I think, is possibly quite unstable at the moment. He could do anything, and I just don't know where all of this is going to end up. It is incredibly depressing seeing what's happening, seeing the willful slaughter of civilians, seeing the destruction of a country. It's repugnant, but I just hope Ukrainians know that the free world is on their side, and those people in the West who support Putin are in a minority. Um, so I'll leave it there. Live Ukraine.